Hi team! So this is day one of reading Catscape. Now we have had a look at Catscape already. We've talked about the front cover, we've talked about the blurb, and we've had a good predict about what we think might happen. So you all popped on your predicting pip hats yesterday and you had a good think about what might happen. Some of us thought that maybe the cats would eat lots of cheese. Some of us thought that because of the yellow on the outside of the cover, so well done. We thought that maybe they would use the tunnels under Edinburgh, so that's good that you used the blurb to remember that, so well done. And also, some of us thought that maybe cats would get trapped in a police car and have to go and find them, okay? But we all thought, because of what we saw in the front and the back, that something was going to happen to cats, and that the boys might have something to do with trying to help to find them. So, let's start with chapter 1. So chapter 1 is called A Timekeeping Problem. Ever since he had first looked at the window of Crockett's watches and clocks, Fergus Spate had known exactly what he wanted for his 12th birthday. Looking beyond the carriage clocks and the pageant velvet trays of shiny silver watches, Fergus's gaze had come to an abrupt halt on the display of digital watches. Each of the watches had blinked at him as they counted time, but one in particular caught his eye. It was spinning slowly around on its own little podium, and a tiny plaque at the bottom declared that this was the Data Boy. A small card alongside proudly proclaimed that the Data Boy was one funky watch with 20 funky functions, whilst the list below showed that these included a stopwatch, calculator, thermometer, light and a display of times in 25 countries around the world, and those were only the first 5. So it's got 20 funky functions, okay? And the first 5 was the stopwatch, calculator, thermometer, light, and display of times in 25 countries around the world. Okay, so that's only the 5 of the funky functions. I wonder if you could pause the video now and see if you could think about if you had a fancy watch, what things would you like it to do? So you could have 20 things on it, what would you like it to do? So have a wee pause now and have a wee chat with somebody that you're with, or have a wee think and think, what would the 20 funky functions be if you could have a special watch? Since then, Fergus had tried to pass Crockett's as often as he could. Each time he reserved his baseball cap so that he could get close enough to the window to see which of the Data Boy's functions was on show. The previous week, one of the shop assistants had come outside to say that Mr. Crockett would prefer it if Fergus didn't stand quite so close to the window, because he was steaming it up for the other customers. With his birthday fast approaching, Fergus was pretty sure that his mum would get the Data Boy for him, but had decided not to say anything until she asked him what he wanted. He was basing this tactic on a particularly hard lesson he had learned on his last birthday, a year ago. He had asked for so often for a DVD called The Pyramid Maze that she did buy it, but also removed the plug from the DVD player so that she couldn't watch it for 3 long days. It seemed to take forever between Fergus's first view of the Data Boy and Mrs. Spate asking him about his birthday. However, when she finally did, it happened to be on Rayburn Place, quite close to Crockett's watches and clocks. And without a word, Fergus had taken his mum firmly by her coat sleeve and had pulled her towards the shop window, narrowly avoiding the pedestrian pile-up with a dog, woman and a pushchair and an old man with a walking stick in his rush to get in. "Are you quite sure this is what you want?" said his mum, smiling as she looked through the glass at the Data Boy while he tried to return her coat to its original shape. "It does so many things," Fergus said excitedly. 20 funky functions. "Is one of them tidying bedrooms?" his mum asked, leaning towards the window to read the information on the Data Boy. "I could find out for you," replied Fergus hopefully. So when the morning of Fergus's birthday arrived, just at the start of the summer holidays, it was no surprise that one of his presents was a long, slim, rectangular package in shiny silver paper about the length of a watch and a strap. He tore into the paper excitedly, opened the box to reveal the Data Boy, and spent most of the day staring into the gleaming watch on his wrist and testing out all of the funky functions. He checked the temperature inside and outside the flat using the thermometer, added up the items on the old till receipt and the calculator, and found out the time differences between Rio de Janeiro and Tokyo. The day after his birthday, Fergus was still finding ways to make sure his new watch. He and his mum had just been to the shops on Rayburn Place and were heading home with 2 bags of groceries. As they turned onto Commonly Bank Avenue, Fergus decided to time how long it would take him to get from the traffic lights and to their flat at number 81. He was concentrating so hard on the data boy as they walked that he didn't anticipate the horror that was rapidly approaching as he happened to glance up. Blue shoes, blue stockings, blue coat, blue scarf, blue hat, and even a hint of blue in the steely grey hair underneath. Mrs. Scrimmager was coming towards them. Fergus immediately tugged at his mum's coat, whispering, "Cross the road! Quick, quick!" "Fergus, don't be so rude." And his mum, who was clearly also trying to work out if dodging the traffic was worth the risk of avoiding meeting her. Fergus groaned, knowing from previous experiences that an encounter with her would mean being trapped in a one-sided conversation for at least 15 minutes. As she spotted them, she let out a loud "Yoo-hoo!" Fergus felt like he was about to be enveloped by a large blue cloud from which there was no escape. "Fiona! Fergus, lovely to see you." "Lovely to see you, Beryl," said Mrs. Spate. Fergus switched off as Mrs. Scrimmager launched into conversation, beginning most of her sentences with, "And have you heard about the people at number..." He decided to continue to put his new watch to practical use by timing how long it would take her to speak without taking a breath. It was 11:33 a.m, and when he began counting the seconds, after a few goes, Fergus gave up, reaching the conclusion that Mrs. Scrimmager must be like a frog and breathing through her skin, because as hard as she tried, she couldn't spot any gaps between the words that she might be drawing a breath. So he's described her like a frog, okay, and that she must breathe through her skin because she can hardly ever wait to have a breath when she's talking to them. As his mum stood listening and nodding patiently while Mrs. Scrimmager droned on, Fergus began pushing a small stone around the edge of his trainer. He moved it into a metal manhole cover and began nudging the stone backwards and forwards along its grooves. "Maybe by the time I get to the other side of the cover, they'll be finished," he thought. It soon became a race for Fergus to get the stone across the grooves when he heard his mum say, "We really have to get going now," for what he thought was like the 14th time, although he had lost count somewhere around 7. "At last," whispered Fergus, as they broke free and headed up the last bit of Commonly Bank Avenue. "She could talk the hind legs of a donkey," said his mum. Fergus decided that if this was true, Mrs. Scrimmager would probably have a large collection of donkey legs stuffed around in mounted glass cases around her house. Fergus and his mum continued up the road until they reached number 81, where Fergus checked his watch again. "No way!" he shouted. "Fergus," his mum said sternly as she put her key in the lock, "don't shout." "My watch isn't working," wailed Fergus. Sure enough, the data boy was showing the time at 11:26. It had lost 7 minutes since he had last looked at it. Mrs. Spate glanced at the digital figures and spotted the seconds ticking over. "Well, it seems to be working now. Maybe it's just a little bit slow. But it was 11:33 a minute ago," said Fergus. "That doesn't make sense. I know that it did feel like as if time was standing still when I was listening to Mrs. Scrimmager, but I didn't realise it was actually going backwards," said his mum, laughing at her own joke. Fergus didn't find this funny, considering his seriousness of his brand new watch being broken. "Come on," his mum said. "We'll reset your watch and see how it goes. And if there's a problem, we can always take it back to Mr. Crockett. In the meantime, why don't you use it to see how quickly we can put the shopping away?" Throughout the rest of the day, Fergus looked at his watch just as much as before. Although each glance was now with some suspicion, he checked closely to see if it was working, like all the new data boys should. All of the functions were performed perfectly over the following days, and so Fergus began to forget about his new watch going backwards until it happened again. A week later, he was stood heading down Commonly Bank Avenue towards the corner shop, clutching a short list of things that his mum had asked him to get. And just before he got to the shop, he passed a lamppost with a homemade poster tied loosely to it, fluttering in the breeze. He glanced at it as he wandered past and had gone for a few more paces before the words sank in. Reward, lost cat, black and white, called Rainbow. A black and white cat called Rainbow, thought Fergus. Someone had a very good sense of humour. He slowly registered that it was some other writing on the poster and backtracked and looked more closely. In typed print underneath it said, £10 reward for information and a £40 reward for safe return. Wow, that would be useful money. thought Fergus, not needing a calculator on his data boy to work out that £40 could mean a few CDs or a few weeks' worth of sweets. And at the bottom of the poster was a contact phone number. Fergus went into the corner shop to ask George the shopkeeper if he could borrow a pen and paper to take a note of it. He nipped back outside, wrote down the details, and made up his mind to keep an eye out for a black and white cat called Rainbow. After buying the milk, magazine and onions on Mum's list, Fergus said goodbye to George and headed home. Outside the shop, he noticed another reward poster. This time, it was stuck to a postbox. £25 reward for the return of a tabby cat called Tabby, it declared. Fergus couldn't help wondering what he would call a cat if he had had one, but decided that Tabby and Rainbow would probably be quite low on the list. He went back to the shop to borrow the pen again. I should start charging for this, said George. How about 10p for every word? Does that seem reasonable? Fergus said that he would be happy to negotiate if he got one of the rewards. Fergus set off for home for a second time, passing the manhole cover where he had been kicking the stone the previous week. Distracted from the thoughts of lost cats and reward money, Fergus remembered that time in his journey at home that day had been interrupted by her. Decided to have another go, he stood at the metal cover and set the stopwatch on his data boy. Suddenly, Fergus blinked hard and stared at the watch. Surely he must be imagining things. He could have sworn that it just jumped back a minute. So if the watch is changing time now, where is he? Have a think about where he is when it's changing time again. Is he at the same place as last time? Is it a different place? Think about where he might be. He could have sworn that it had just gone back a minute. Had it really just gone from 10:47 to 10:46? He stared even harder at his watch, trying desperately not to blink and break his concentration. Then after a minute, he passed what he saw had been waiting for. His watch changed to 10:45. Something made Fergus look down at his feet. Was it just a coincidence that his watch had lost time when he had been standing in the same spot? The manhole cover that he was standing on looked as normal as any other that he'd seen before, although he knew that he couldn't claim to be an expert in this field. As he bent down to look more closely, he was unprepared for what might happen next. Out of the corner of his eye, he saw a movement just before impact occurred, and the next thing he saw was that the sky and the baseball cap went flying past, not realising that he'd been knocked off his feet and whacked on his head on the pavement. And he couldn't work out why his left cheek was getting a big wet stripe on it every 2 seconds. Opening his eyes, he found that a small white dog was licking his face enthusiastically. Fergus heard somebody say, "Heel, Jock, heel!" Looking round rather blearily from his prone position, he saw the rather round boy standing a few feet away holding a metro scooter, which Fergus reckoned must have been going top speed until a few seconds before. The dog was now panting heavily beside the boy's scruffy baseball boots. The boy was carrying a small but very heavy-looking rucksack and seemed to have come out of an incident remarkably unharmed. "Sorry, I didn't see you," he said, scratching his head and looking a bit embarrassed. "That's good news," said Fergus, sitting up and brushing down his combats. "I'd hate to think it was deliberate." The boy grinned sheepishly beneath a mop of curly brown hair. "Hi, my name's Murdo, and you've just met Jock," he said, pointing at the small Jack Russell. "What's your name?" "Fergus," said Fergus, getting shakily to his feet, rubbing his short blonde hair and finding to his surprise that he was not bleeding from anywhere. He picked up his baseball cap, and then he noticed that Murdo's bulging rucksack even more detail. There was equipment popping out of every pocket. A pair of headphones, a clipboard, a torch, a pen, attached to every available flap. "What's all that stuff?" Fergus asked. Murdo looked a little bit embarrassed. "Oh, just some bits and pieces I use. What are you doing on that manhole cover anyway? I was about to time how long it took me to walk home from here." At that moment, Fergus realised that in the crash he had not only dropped his small bag of shopping, but his piece of paper with the details of the lost cats who were also blowing down the street. Spotting the problem, Murdo nipped over on his scooter and slapped the paper down with his foot. Picking it up and looking at Fergus's scribbles, he said cautiously, "Are you looking for the cats as well?" Well, I thought I might have a go," said Fergus. "You've only got 2 on your list," said Murdo, trying to smooth out Fergus's rather crumpled piece of paper. "I only copied them down about 5 minutes ago," said Fergus. "You've only got 2 on your list, though." But have you got a list?" Murdo hesitated, looked around to see if anyone else was watching, and then took off his rucksack and unbuckled the top. He pulled out a loose-leaf folder which had bits of paper almost fighting each other to get out. Squatting on the pavement, he opened it, flicked through the well-thumbed pages, and looked up smiling. Each page was a photocopy of a different lost cat poster. Fergus's eyes widened. "Wow, there must be about 43, he said, and Murdo looked very impressed. 43. Have you been collecting them over the years? No, that's just it, said Murdo, the excitement rising in his voice. These are all from the last 3 months and from with 2 miles in here. Fergus's eyes widened still further, and then he started putting 2 and 2 together and began to come up with a very large number. How much do all the rewards add up to? He said, trying not to sound too interested. Murdo pointed to a list. £750. And 5 more, which promise a substantial reward. Wow! And have you found any of the cats so far? Nope, not a single one. These cats have just disappeared into thin air, said Murdo. Listen, why don't we go for a Coke and I'll fill you in? I've been dying to tell someone about this for ages. An hour later, having delivered some bruised onions, dented milk and a crumpled magazine and a hurried explanation to his mum, he was perched on a window seat in a Copper Kettle cafe on Rayburn Place. His head was reeling, but it was no longer a result of being upended by Murdo. He was now trying to come to terms with the information on cats of every name and description. And at the same time, his stomach was spinning in different directions, and the alter effects of 2 Cokes, 2 donuts, and a vanilla slice. Murdo had been on the case, as he kept calling it, for 3 months now, initially spending time at weekends, but now using every day of the summer holidays to try and make some progress in finding even one of the missing cats. He had certainly been very busy. He had visited all 43 lost cat owners and had recorded descriptions of their cats and details of where and when their cats had gone missing. Murdo kept mentioning his incident room, which he described as the nerve centre of his lost cat operation. He was very excited at the idea of trying to solve what would seem like an intriguing mystery, and he had agreed to visit Murdo's incident room at the earliest opportunity. What's the time? Asked Murdo. I think I'd be better getting home. Fergus pulled up his sleeve. That's a data boy, said Murdo, his eyes widening. Before Fergus could say anything, Murdo disappeared off his seat and started rummaging in one of the rucksack's many pockets. A moment later, he pulled out a rather scratchy-looking data boy. They're brilliant, aren't they? This one hasn't lost a second of time in 10 months, and even though I've given it a bit of a hard time. Fergus realised that he'd been so absorbed in the story of Murdo's investigation that he had quite forgotten about what his watch was doing and its timekeeping problems. I didn't tell you why I was looking at that manhole cover, Fergus said, making a snap decision that Murdo might be someone who would believe this curious story. Sure enough, Murdo listened intently as Fergus described how his new watch had developed a curious habit of going backwards. Well, there's only one thing to do, said Murdo. Let's go and test my data boy in the same place. Fergus grinned, and without delay, the boys paid up, collected Jock from outside, and headed back to the scene of their collision. So, that's chapter 1 finished now. I hope you enjoyed the opening and that you're quite intrigued to find out what might happen next. The chapter 2 is called The Incident Room. Now, I'll just reread the little bit about the incident room. So, Murdo kept mentioning his incident room, which he described as the nerve centre of his lost cat operation. So, what do you think the incident room might be? What do you think they might use it for? So just pause now and have a little think about what you think they might use the incident room for, okay? And why do you think it's been described as the nerve centre of his lost cat operation? So just pause now for me. Okay, so now you've had a little think. Do you think that the incident room might be a place where they gather all their information? Maybe they've got things on the walls that tell them about where all the different lost cats are. Or a big map, maybe. A big map of Edinburgh showing them where everything was gone missing. So, what I want you to do today for your task is I would like you to draw a picture of what you think Murdo's incident room might look like. So I'd like you to have a look and think, Will there be maps on the walls? Will they have lots of notes and bits of paper? Maybe they'll have pictures of the cat so they know who they're looking for. Okay, so have a little go at that for me today. You'll see that on Teams, I have listed the different challenge levels. So your first challenge level is to get is to draw the picture and label it. Your second challenge level is to draw the picture of the instant room and then write a few sentences about it and tell me a little bit about what they might do in there. And then for 3-star challenges today, okay, so your big star challenges today, you need to draw the picture of the instant room, you need to write the labels on, so you need to label all the different bits of it, and then I'd like you to write a descriptive paragraph. Now you'll see that in this story here, okay, there are lots of adjectives, okay, because that helps you paint a picture in your head of what things might look like. So I would like you to use adjectives in your sentences for your 3-star challenges today, okay? So if you were going to describe, oh, that there was a map on the wall. In the instant room, there was a map on the wall. You would say, in the instant room, there was a large, colourful map on the wall that had lots of pieces of long string attached to it to point out where the different cats went missing, okay? You're very good at using adjectives because I've seen lots of adjectives in your writing even yesterday, okay? Never mind all the time you've been at school. So, enjoy listening to the first chapter, okay? I hope that you'll join me again for chapter 2 soon, and I can't wait to see all of your beautiful pictures of your instant rooms and your lovely descriptive sentences, okay? So I'll catch up with you soon. Bye.